This episode is in partnership with Authority Magazine. Authority Magazine, a Medium publication, is devoted to sharing in-depth and interesting interviews featuring people who are authorities in business, pop culture, wellness, social impact, and tech.
Today, we're going to speak to someone who describes herself as a late bloomer.
And for Melissa Giberson, a housewife and mother of two, it all began at a visit to the local YMCA when she found herself questioning her own sexuality.
From there, her journey of discovery began. How scary was it coming out? And where does it end, if ever? Melissa, welcome to Believe in People.
Thank you, Amy. It's great to be here. Hi, Kevin.
Good morning.
We're excited. Okay, it's no secret that you have a huge fan and friend in Amy Ferris. She loves you. She also told me that you're sassy, brilliant, audacious, and for us to just get right into it into the conversation because you're a quick wit. So I love that. Okay, so we will. You recently wrote a book called Late Bloomer, where you talk about your later in life sexual awakening. And in your words, you said your subsequent journey through grief and loss and love and self-acceptance. Why did it take until now for you to bloom?
That's a great question. And thank you for having me, and thanks to Amy Ferris. Yes, it's our fandom is mutual. I'm just as big a fan of hers as she is of mine. That's a great question. Why did it take me so long? I don't think we'll ever know. But the first time I asked that question, am I gay? I was 44. And the only thing I can think about in answering that question is I was set on a path. A lot of us are. And from very early on, no role models, no great communication in my house growing up. No, who do you want to be when you grow up? How do you feel? No such communication, just you'll go to college, you'll get married, presumably to a man, you'll have kids. And that message was everywhere. That message was on my television, in my music, in my house, in my neighborhood, everywhere. So that was the path that I took without ever thinking anything else, without doing a deep dive, because I didn't have the resources and I didn't have the language. But I was always searching for something. I just didn't know what it was. And I always searched outside of myself. So I searched for school. I searched in a career. I searched in my neighborhood. If I just do this, I'll feel better. If I just do that, if I join the PTO, if I get more involved in temple, if I take a deeper dive into my career, if I just become the best stay-at-home mom that I could be, Carol Brady, everything will fall into place. And with everything I attempted to do, I still had that there was something missing in me, without knowing what that was. And fast forward, I met a woman, and I was intrigued in a way that I had not been so intrigued in a very long time. And some of the intrigue was absolutely different. There was a physical attraction, but I didn't think that much of it. Women have women friends. We're emotional. We make connection. And I had an emotional connection with a woman years earlier. So I think I was just excited to have another close woman friend, and didn't really do a deep dive into what it meant, was just really excited to have met this person.
So a lot of this was external. I was going to use the word June Cleaver. You used the Brady Bunch, but it's kind of true in a way. And here I am speaking as a male, as a man, as a he and a him. So please feel happy to interject at any moment because I deserve it. But the bottom line is all of these things were external expectations of others. And what you're saying to me is that internally, emotively, love, love is a word that gets thrown around a lot, but you experienced something that was entirely new for you. Was it a
with,
different kind of love, or was it real love?
with this woman that I met.
Yes, or what,
It,
or with yourself?
well,
Yeah, good
it's
question. That's a great question. With
Well,
yourself.
I let's put it this way. I loved the feelings that I had. I don't know if I loved her. I was intrigued by her, fascinated by her, but the feelings that were aroused in me is what I fell in love with, how it felt to
Yeah, but
be,
is that a sexual thing, or is that a persona thing?
well, with her for the first time, I had a physical attraction and it was sexual. But I didn't think about it. I didn't make the connection because I was just so immersed in feeling these feelings I had never had before. So I just sort of I went with it without thinking about it too much until the day I was at the gym and I saw a different woman who was applying lotion to her legs, and I was just captivated by the sight of her. And that's the first time I had asked myself that question, am I gay? Um, and it wasn't, I didn't ask the question when I was having sexual feelings for this other woman, but I asked it when I saw this like stranger in the gym and I was just found myself mesmerized by it. And that's when the journey in my mind really begins, because that's when I do a deep dive into myself. Who am I? What are these feelings about? Is this a fluke? And I have to go find the answers to that question. And I do. And it turns out it's me. It's not a fluke. And I work until I become um, accepting that I'm not the person I thought I was. And the challenge for that is it meant that my kids would be impacted. And that was the one thing I never, ever wanted to do. I never wanted to change my children's story um, the way that I did. I worked really hard to develop a life for them that I didn't have growing up, and I was doing it. So that was my concern, that
Okay. And wow, you know
choosing
what?
me meant changing their story.
Yeah, and changing their story, and you changed your story. Wow, how powerful is that? Because if you really think about it, why is it so easier? It's easy to define our story. Like you're a mom of two adult
Mhm.
children, you're a writer, you're an occupational therapist, you're a nature lover, you're a picture taker, you're external optimist. But okay, so those are things. Why is it easier to define what we do rather than who we are?
You know, that's a great question. I don't think we're given the language for that or the permission for that. I think that it's always about what do you want to be when you grow up? What are your roles? You know, taking care of others, always before
Who do
what do
we
you
want
need?
you to be when you grow up?
Ah, good one. That's good. Who do we want you to
Who do,
be?
yeah, right, right. So I always, I was the one that never asked my kids that question. What do you want to do? What do you want to be? Who do you want to be? What kind of person do you want to be in the world? I used to say integrity is, you know, who you are when nobody's watching. What do you do when nobody's around? But I think that it's easier to take care of others than to do the deep dive in. Most of the people I know were not given the language for that, the tools for that, if you will. And it's a choice we make to not think of it as being selfish, but to say, you know, my kids are better if I'm better, if I'm happier, if I'm a better person, if I'm a whole person. The hope is that I will model something for my kids that wasn't modeled for me.
Hmm. So you're finding the whole. You mentioned that that was the beginning of your journey. Obviously, there were probably a lot of pitfalls along the way. I'm assuming whatever relationship you had with the male in your life, you know, took a left turn.
Yes, it did. I was married at the time that I had had this revelation. We were married 19 years. And so that was a big chunk of time. And he was a great guy. He was very supportive in the beginning. And yes, there were some pitfalls along the way for any number of reasons. And the story unfolded, as a lot of them do, very messy. Uh, it became very messy, became very traumatizing. And that that was challenging. That was challenging.
Especially when you think about, okay, so the excitement of discovering yourself, who you are, especially later in life, which shouldn't define anything. You should be evolving in your journey, but also, okay, so then all of a sudden it's holy shit, this is scary coming out or blooming now. Okay, so take us through that. Then what? Like, how are your
it is scary. It's a little bit of both. To finally have answered the question, what was missing in me all along, and not have to search anymore, is absolutely so rewarding. It's like, oh, here it is. It was in here all the time and I just didn't know it. So that felt great. The flip side is there were, innocent bystanders that, casualties of this little personal war that I was determined to win for myself, and trying to take care of my kids at the same time. But unfortunately, in my case, my husband at the time, understandably, was hurt, and his life also had to change, not because he needed it or wanted it, and he needed to start over as well. And so that's where the pitfalls come in. So it was challenging, and it is definitely two sides of a coin. It feels great to say, this is who I am and I want to live this life. And it's really, really hard when your kids get hurt. But coming into your own later in life is also interesting, because I have the benefit of having walked both sides of that road. I never understood and I'll use the word that gets thrown around a lot, privilege, that I had being, with a man all those years, and never having to be concerned about my safety when I was with him, or people looking at me, or anything like that. Suddenly now I'm with a woman, and are we safe to hold hands? And it's interesting because, I've had a best friend who was a woman years and years ago, and nobody would have thought, I didn't think about it, if sometimes women link their arms as they're walking down the street, and nobody thinks about it. But fast forward to now, I have a partner, and it doesn't feel the same. Now you wonder, is there a safety? Is there a risk? And so I'm able to see it from both sides now. We do have to be careful depending where we are.
Well, once again, of course, it's another societal pressure that you're describing there, because in terms of various cultures around the world, in the Middle East, men hold hands, and that's not seen to be anything. But in the Middle East, being gay could be a death sentence.
Yes.
In Europe, women hold hands and walk arm in arm, and nobody seems to care about it. And so, again, we're talking about external forces coming into play, but I want to ask you, first of all, not only were there pitfalls, it must have been tremendously painful for you to have the courage to do this, because, as you mentioned earlier, there were innocent bystanders that were around. I have to ask you this: was it worth it?
Yes. Yes. To know your truth, to know who you are in this world, was absolutely worth it. Does it hurt me that my kids were hurt at the time, that their story changed? Yes. And I carry that. But we all get just one life. And I do hope that I modeled for them, the importance of putting themselves, knowing who they are, doing that deep dive. Is it worth it? Yes.
And certainly too, Melissa, I mean, you were mentioning just before we started the podcast, your children had really were supportive of joining you on your book tour, which I want to talk about. And then the three of you get together and you're going away. So that's something good transpired out of all that.
Yes. Yeah. I had, my kids have shown up for me. They've been supportive of me, and I'm so grateful for that. And I love spending time. Nobody makes me laugh the way when I'm with my kids. It's just something very, very unique, and it's very, very different. And, add anybody else into the equation and things always change. But there's something very unique about spending time with my kids. And because as I was going through all of these changes and my ex-husband was struggling, he was there for the kids, but he couldn't be there for me. So I ended up doing an awful lot of decision making and single parenting. So my kids and I spent a lot of time together, and we did a lot of road trips. We did all the college searches, and we would do vacations together. And I loved that time. So I am trying to bring that back. We are going away, just the three of us, which we haven't done since before the pandemic. And so what came out of this was just an awful lot of memories and a special relationship I have with my kids that I'm so grateful for.
Now, we would like you to talk a little bit about your book. I'm assuming what we're talking about right now is kind of like what your book is like, but tell us about what the book is about, how your coming out party, or however you want to describe it. But I want to, because there are so
Your
many
Bloomy
people
note. Bloomy note.
blooming. Yeah, there are, you know, I come from an era where, in the beginning, being gay was illegal. I come from an era when I was a young reporter, police used to regularly raid, gay bars, or however you want to stigmatize those. And now you hear a lot of young people saying, I don't know how to come out, or I'm afraid to tell my family these sorts of things. So your courageous journey surely uh, can be some example to others, perhaps advice to others. So tell us a little bit about the book, and what would your advice be to someone else who finds themselves in the same situation as you?
Absolutely. So there was no coming out party because it was so challenging. Still waiting for that. But the
Well, we're
book,
here for you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, so the book starts out with my asking that question, am I gay? 44 years old. And I do a deep dive into, what led up to that point. And that the mystery is that I had been having this relationship for a couple of months with this woman, but still never asked the question. So I wanted to take people through my story, start to finish, because I hadn't seen another book. Now, lots of people go through this experience, men and women. I've met and spoken to both. This is not so unusual. It was new to me. I didn't know this could happen. And the first time I found a book, I was looking for help, and it was very validating. So the reason I did the book was to go through start to finish, from asking the question, why didn't I ask it before, to what's the answer? What does it mean? And the pitfalls, if you will, the consequences of it, until I come around and do that deep dive and come up and say, this is who I am. And I'm choosing this life. I'm choosing to be authentic in my life. I can't choose my sexuality, but I chose to embrace it.
Yeah.
And
And
any advice I would give for anybody who is doing a deep dive for any reason, it doesn't have to be sexuality. People come out for all kinds of reasons, and they reinvent themselves a lot of times in midlife because the timing is right. Um, you have to go for it. If you have a calling to do a deep dive, to reinvent yourself, to figure things out, my advice is you don't want to leave with regrets, and you don't want to not have as full a life as you can. And so my advice is find your people, find the resources. It's, it's not a journey. Any of those journeys, for whatever reason, if you're struggling, that should be taken alone. So you find your people who have had similar journeys or who are on the journey at the same time. And you be patient. You're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days, but you keep moving forward and you get there.
yeah, that's pretty powerful. But really, late bloomers is really for anyone who's looking um, to find their voice in another way, or to
Yes.
maybe express themselves in a way that they've been hiding Because this is one thing I found that was really interesting I don't know if it's just 2023, but in 2023 on social media, it seemed that there was a recurring theme, and the recurring theme always seemed to be about people actually almost begging others to be kind. We heard kindness, and in my own naive way, it just seemed so sad to me because I also felt that, okay, are we trying to convince ourselves that we need to be kind or others? And then why is it so difficult for us to be kind?
Yeah, I've noticed that too. It's such a simple word. We've always known it. And for some reason, there does seem to be a need, if you will, to remind people to do it, to be kind. And I'm not, I don't want to get political, but there was a time that people were given permission to say things that they never would have said before. Everyone's entitled to their opinion and everyone has their experiences, but we are all different and we are all unique. And once the Pandora's box was opened and people had permission to just say what they wanted to say, which was not always kind and not welcoming, I think the pushback for that was now those of us that advocate for kindness, want to be the ones to remind people of a time when we didn't need to deliver that message. Now we do. Now we do, because there was another message that was delivered that you don't need to, that you don't need to be kind. But my belief is you do. You do. It doesn't cost anything. It doesn't cost anything to be kind, but the dividends it pays are just huge. They really are. And I'd like to see a return to that time of kindness again.
And of course, this whole business about looking over your shoulder if you're walking down the street holding hands, if you're in a mixed marriage, if you are whatever society deems is different, whatever that means, that's where that all comes into play. And let me ask you this, have you found that you've become more accepting as a person of others as a result of what your decision has been?
Yes. I always was, but I think that I've had to give it more thought because I think we all like to think we are accepting. We all like to think nice things about ourselves.
Yeah.
But I did challenge myself and say, is that really true? Am I really as accepting as I always thought I was? And I do. I have a new lens through which to look in terms of seeing people as just human beings and not putting them into categories or groups. The way that over these last few years, as a woman, it's always challenging when you're a woman. You've always had to look over your shoulder. You learn to put the keys between your fingers. You learn to disregard comments that are made. I am Jewish, and so you learn a great deal when you're Jewish. And for a lot of sometimes I'm the first Jew that some people have ever met, and I'm like, that's amazing. And they're looking at me, or, people have made comments to my son when he was in elementary school. You're Jewish? Where are your horns?
Yeah.
And now identifying as a gay woman, it's just fascinating because I feel like people want to put me in a bucket. I'm not always safe, and I don't want to do that. So I see people as human beings across the board now. And I just think that that's so important to not, categorize people into certain buckets and then slap labels on them and have expectations. I think we need to hold space for people and get to know them as human beings.
Yeah. And Melissa, what happened? So, your family, but what about are your parents still alive? What about your parents or siblings? How was that for you? And sadly, it's about them, not you. Really, I mean, if you think about it.
Yes. My parents are alive. They divorced when I was young, which is a big part of my story because for me, it was traumatizing. But they are both still alive and, doing well. My mom has been incredibly supportive. I write about in the book when I have to tell her that my husband and I are separating, and I was frightened. She came from a different place, and I was worried that, she would be disappointed or she would be angry. And the reality is that she said life's too short to be unhappy. And then I told her the reason why we were separating, and she's been nothing but supportive ever since. And my father wasn't around for that particular journey. We've reconnected over the last couple of years, and also very, very supportive. And I'm grateful for that. And my sister, I do have a sister, and she's also been supportive.
So you're
Wow.
very lucky in that
Yeah.
aspect. In a second, Amy's going to ask you our final question, which is sort of our signature question. But um,
Who are you? No, I'm kidding.
I want to ask you this. I'm going to ask you this because I can. Is the sex better?
Oh my.
That's a great question.
Oh my. I think
Only Kevin.
only right. I think everything is better when you come to whatever it is that you're doing with a sense of self, with a sense of awareness. And I think that makes everything better. Just knowing
More,
who I am.
everything is more personal, attentive, real.
Yeah,
Yep.
everything comes alive because you're whatever you're doing in any context, you're doing it as your best self, as your
Yeah.
authentic self. And
Yeah.
so how can things not be better? Everything, I always liken it when my mother a couple of years ago had the cataract surgery.
Mm.
And I had to laugh because, she was staying with me so I could take care of her. And she's like, oh, everything is just so bright and vibrant. And I'm like, did you have cataract surgery or acid, Mom? Like she was just so, woo woo. But that's what it feels like there was a film lifted and everything is brighter and more vibrant. It doesn't mean it's utopia. It doesn't mean it doesn't have its problems. It does. I don't want to, say anything and that's not, reality based. I mean, everybody has their issues and their problems. But having a better sense of who I am does make everything in my world brighter
Yeah.
and better.
And Melissa, will you hold up your book, Late Bloomer? And I'm going to ask you this question. So at the end of our podcast, thank you, Late Bloomer. And that's out. Where is that out? Everywhere?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere. Independent bookstores, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, I believe, online, in
Great.
stores.
Well, read the book because it's insightful. And it really hits the core. It hits you to the core in wherever you are in your space and world and being. And I want to ask you this, Melissa. Each week we ask, because this is Believe in People podcast, why you believe in people. However, I'm going to flip it. Why should others believe in people?
Why should others believe in people? We need one another. We are built for connection, and we get wounded in relationships, but we heal in relationships. And so, we really do need one another for everything. So I think that nobody exists in a vacuum. We are one big community, and we can form smaller communities as well. But we are built for connection. And so we should embrace that and we should help one another. We hurt one another, but then we also heal together.
Well,
Well,
we
Melissa
appreciate you
Giberson,
connecting with
thank
us.
you. Thank you so much for being with us. Late bloomer, it sounds to me like you're more of a perennial and who continues to bloom. And I think I got that right.
That's
But
good.
but
I think
thank you so much.
I think we're always blooming. I do. I think we're
Yes,
always blooming. We're always evolving.
I agree. And thank you for sharing some of this journey with us today.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful. I appreciate the time.
Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you.
It was such a pleasure to have Melissa on today, Kev, because first of all, late bloomer is a really, for anyone who's kind of, and I think it's probably relates to all of us, if anyone's sort of questioning where they are in their life later on in their years, or their third or fourth act, whatever people use to say about getting older. This is it's enlightening. It sort of helps you find the strength and courage to move on with your life in a way that's actually exciting for yourself.
Yep. Be yourself and be strong and find yourself. That seems to be the message that she's delivering in her book. If you want to meet and discover more interesting people like Melissa, then please subscribe to our podcast, Believe in People, and we'll speak to you in 1 week's time. Thank you.